Hi class, so I'm going to pick up here. A few of my classes went beyond this point, but I think this is the safest point to pick up just for all classes total. I will say, please forgive me in advance for hearing my fire alarm or monitor chirping throughout the process. I have to fix the batteries, so please excuse that. All right, so moving on, I want you to be familiar with the biopsychosocial approach. Um, with the biopsychosocial approach, it's just very simple. You have the three contributors to the behavior or mental processing, which is one, the biological influences, which really you have all of the breakdown. You have the bulleted points where it's just genetics, 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 basically. And so biological influence is our influence from our DNA, from our genetic makeup. That's all you need to know about the biological influence. The psychological influences is our psyche, our mental. All right, so here you see learned fears associated with it, things that we've learned. That's all our mental. And then also our emotional and cognitive processing, which is our mental processing. That's the second contributor. And then the last contributor is the social cultural influence. Society and our culture influence on our behavior and mental processing. All right, so be familiar with the biopsychosocial approach, which contains the three that I just mentioned: biological influence, psychological influence, and social cultural. All right, moving on to the next slide. So there are three areas of study or three professionals, psychological professionals, psychology professionals I want you to be familiar with from this particular slide. That's going to be your counseling psychologist, where they're going to focus more so on therapy, like talk therapy, to speak to clients that are having marital issues. They could also have relationship issues and they're not married. They can do premarital counseling as well. Or if you're having conflict at work, they could help you with conflict resolution or even issues at school, or just issues in life. You know, you may just feel like, I need to talk to somebody because I'm stressed out or something like that, and you're not going to be diagnosed with a psychological disorder because you may not have a psychological disorder. You just may be enduring stress and just need someone to kind of help you unpack some things and just figure out life. That's going to be your go-to person for counseling psychology. They strictly focus on counseling you through talk therapy, okay, and therapy kind of resources to help you kind of get through whatever you're battling with at that particular time in your life. All right, the next professional I want you to be familiar with is the clinical psychologist. And what I want you to be familiar with is really their differences. So clinical psychologists are going to conduct therapy as well. They definitely have the ability to conduct therapy, but their focus is more so on therapy for those that have any type of mental disorder or psychological disorder, or think that they have these disorders. They can do assessments and they can give them therapy that is not necessarily medication, but there's other therapeutic processes and medical procedures that can be done that's not medicine. So that's going to be the focus for the clinical psychologist. And then the only psychiatrist, the only medical professional or the only psychological professional that can administer medicine, prescribe medicine, is going to be your psychiatrist. Now, you may see that they provide counseling therapy, talk therapy. They can absolutely do that. But more so, they're going to specialize in research, a lot of brain research, to try to help figure out what's going on, why these parts of the brain work the way they do, how these drugs affect the different parts of the brain, how those drugs can be beneficial to a person that may be experiencing psychological disorders or have a psychological disorder or mental disorder. That's really the focus of a psychiatrist. And they're the only ones that hold a medical degree, a MD degree, okay? So be familiar with the difference between the counseling psychologist, clinical psychologist, and psychiatrist. Okay, moving on. All right, two terms from this particular slide I want you to be familiar with. Those two terms are hindsight bias, which is also the I knew it all along phenomenon. And really what the I knew it all along phenomenon in hindsight bias is the phenomenon that you think you knew that something was going to happen, but you only knew it after it actually happened. So let's say you have a friend, and your friend had a horrible boyfriend, and your friend called you up and said, "Yeah, we finally broke up." And you say, "I knew it. I knew it. I knew it was going to happen." Well, if your friend had been dating this person for a very long time, you didn't know that that was going to happen. It was likely that it was going to happen, but you didn't exactly know that. So that's hindsight bias. You know it in hindsight after the fact. All right. And then overconfidence is the tendency to think you know more than what you actually know. Okay. So those two terms, overestimation of knowledge, overconfidence as well. All right. Now we'll get into the scientific method. Okay. And so you may have heard the term before. Most likely you have by the time you reach college. You've heard of the scientific method before. A lot of us hear about it in a science class. Didn't think it would come up in a psychology class. But science is science and research is research. And psychology is a huge research science. So when you have a theory, you have to prove the theory. You can't just theorize about something and say, hey, it's true because I said it. You got to go and you got to prove it. So this is why we're seeing the scientific method in psychology. So some terms I want you to be familiar with is going to be theory. All right, theory, explanation of a integrated set of principles that organizes observation and predicts behaviors or events. If you theorize about something, it's that you think this particular thing is going to happen, but you got to prove it. You think it's true, but you got to go and then get the supporting details to prove that it's true or then signify that it's not. Okay, class, so I talked about theory, and excuse the person calling me during my recording. I'm trying to move this screen around. All right, there we go. So let's pick up with hypothesis. A hypothesis is a testable prediction. We're going to see they really have a really good demonstration of how the scientific method works in relation to a theory, and more so like psychological than like in science that we've seen it before. All right, the next term I want you to be familiar with, so we said theory, hypotheses. Next up is going to be case study. Case study is going to be a technique, a in-depth technique when a person or group is studied, discussed, and an in-depth analysis. So that's what a case study is. And you've probably seen a case study before. It's very descriptive. A lot of times it's about a person. So when it's talking about the person, it doesn't give you general information. It gives you, let's say if it was about a kid or an adult, it would give you their age. It would tell you where they were from. In terms of psychology, it would tell you if they've been diagnosed with a disorder before, if they're looking to be diagnosed, who their parents were, did their parents have previous issues. It's very much so in depth. Okay, it gives you all the details so that you come to a correct analysis once you've reviewed all that information. All right, and then next we have naturalistic observation, observing and recording something or someone in its natural environment without manipulation. One of the best examples, I think, is if you've ever watched the Discovery Channel, and let's say they're out in the jungle and they're observing let's say, a lion, okay? You don't see them right up with a camera in the lion's face. They're far off. They may even be whispering as they're explaining to you the lion's behavior, what they're doing, what this means based on how they're reacting. You wouldn't get that information if you were manipulating that or some way, or if you change their environment, because then they'll start acting different, then they will behave different. So you learn more by not having any control, not having anything to do with a person's natural environment. You learn the true the true behavior of either a person or even an animal. Okay. And then the last term I want you to be familiar with on this particular slide is going to be survey. We done surveys A lot of times people hate surveys because you're like, here's another survey. Same thing, okay? A survey, a descriptive technique in obtaining self-reported attitudes and or behaviors, usually done by questioning a random sample of a group, okay? You ask questions, you're supposed to give your true answer. So then it's supposed to give that person that's conducting that research a true kind of, or a better description of what they're looking for, what they're searching for. So sometimes we may have to do a customer service survey when we call to pay our bill. Okay, how long was your wait? Was the customer service agent able to answer all of your questions? That's a survey. Okay, the survey isn't intended to annoy us. It may be what that company is trying to do is maybe see, hey, what are our peak hours? Okay, do we need to hire more customer service agents? Or do we need to have more training if they get a high number of responders that say, hey, they weren't able to answer my questions? Okay, so it's something, some information that that company, that person is looking for when you are having to ask people or a group to conduct a survey or complete a survey. All right, that concludes that particular slide. Let's move on. All right, here's just some more information about theories, scientific method part 2. This is just really a FYI slide. I want to go to this particular slide because it gives you a breakdown of how the scientific method works. So we can theorize about anything. Sleep boosts memory. Okay, we can say that, but we got to prove that it's true. Okay, so we have our theory, which leads to our hypothesis. Okay, here, example. So this is a sample hypothesis. When sleep deprived, people remember less from the day before. Okay, now that's testable because we would test a group of people that are sleep deprived, and then we would test a group of people that had a sufficient amount of sleep. And then how do we do that? We give them some study material, and then we give them an assessment, and we see who scores the highest. Okay, so then you do the research and observation, give study material to people before with an ample night's sleep, just like I told you, and then a group with a shortened night's sleep. And then we test their memory the next day. And based on the information that we get, we can either confirm that, guess what? Our theory is correct, or no, our theory isn't correct. But what's going to give us that answer is the assessment of this group. How did they perform? If they performed well and they didn't have enough sleep, then guess what? We have to revise or totally scratch our theory, okay? And if it's true, then we confirm it. And that's how the scientific method works in a simpler format, okay? So just a really good example of how it works. All right, this is just giving you some continued information about case studies, naturalistic observation, but you're already familiar with the term. You can just continue to read over that as it relates to the scientific method. It does the same thing here with the surveys as well. And then here we're talking about correlations. I want you to be familiar with how correlation is defined and then how it relates to the scientific method. Correlations is really trying to see how closely related two things are together. And if it's a correlation, it can predict a behavior or an outcome. Okay, so be familiar with correlation. All right. From this particular slide, I want you to be familiar with random assignment, experimental group, and the control group, okay? Experimental group is a group that's going to be a part of your research that receives the actual treatment. So let's say you were doing or testing a weight loss pill that you've created. The experimental group would get the real diet pill that you have that's supposed to work and help them lose weight. The control group is the group that's not going to receive the treatment. So does that mean they don't get a pill at all? No, they just don't get a diet pill. They may get a sugar pill, but that pill isn't going to do anything for them, okay? And so that's the difference between the experimental group and the control group, okay? Now, why do you have two different groups? Because you need to see if your pill actually works, okay? So that's why you have two different groups. Now, random assignment is when you randomly assign participants to be the experimental group or control group by chance. So a really, really simple way to do that, and of course, researchers have other ways of doing this for sure, but you could put, let's say you were going to have, or you wanted 20 participants. You could number 1 to 20, put them in a hat, shake them up, and have each participant pick a number, okay? That's by random assignment, and everyone that has a maybe the third number, you'll pick, hey, number 3, number 4, number 10, or whatever, just randomly picking numbers. Okay, that would be your random assignment, because it's by chance that this particular person got it. You didn't say, hey, I want to pick the guy that looks like he's already fit, or hey, I want to pick a person that looks like they're overweight for my pill to really, really work. That would be you having a bias and you personally selecting that. But when you do it using a method like that, and that's a very, very elementary method, but you using a method like that is contributing to your by chance, because you're not playing any role in those particular people picking the numbers that you had already selected to be in the experimental group and those that are going to be in the control group. You didn't know who was going to pick what. Okay, so that's your random assignment. Okay, and here, this slide gives you a little bit better understanding about the difference in the control group and experimental group, but also I want you to be familiar with two terms here: the independent variable, which is the in an experiment, the variable that is going to be manipulated or can be manipulated, and the dependent variable is the outcome of what you're trying to measure. So here in the experimental group, all right, the independent variable is breast milk, and the control group, formula. As far as, and what they mean by formula is like milk formula for a child. All right, those can be changed. That's why they're considered the independent variable. Okay, because we can make changes, we can manipulate that, and we can make it something totally different if we wanted to. Okay, but what is not going to change, what the outcome is, what we're looking to measure, is intelligence. As you can see, that doesn't change, that's set. All right, so what they will be trying to do and what they're trying to conduct research here on is, if children that drink breast milk, are they going to score higher on an intelligence scale, okay, when it comes to by the age 8? Or are children that are formula fed going to score higher? That's what they're looking for. So depending on their scores, going through the research method, they're going to either have to confirm, deny, or revise that, hey, children that drink breast milk are more intelligent than those that are formula fed, or vice versa. Okay. All right. We've already covered case study, naturalistic observation. That's all I wanted you to be familiar with there. We're going to discuss ethics just a second in the next slide. All right, so here what they were bringing up animals is just in that previous slide, was just saying that animals need to be protected as much as humans, which is absolutely correct. When research is being conducted, just because they cannot communicate in the same way that humans communicate doesn't mean that we should take advantage of them when we're conducting research, okay? So that's why you have animal rights that came about saying, hey, you can't test these certain products on animals because it's unethical, because it's causing them harm and things of that nature, which is true, okay? So these are some of the codes of ethics according to the APA, American Psychological Association, and Britain's BPS, okay? So have to have informed consent from the participant. Now, of course, we can't have informed consent from the participant if we're doing something with animals, but it has to follow the code of conduct or code of ethics as it relates to specifically to animals. All right, so I have to sign off and say, hey, I understand that this is what your research is about and I want to participate. Okay, that's your informed consent. Now, I also have to make sure that when I'm conducting the research that I have gone above and beyond to make sure that I am not contributing to a great deal of harm or extensive harm and discomfort to my participants. Okay, so I can't just want to create some type of research where I'm saying, hey, I want to shock people so bad to see if they're going to pass out. I can't do that. Okay, because that would cause greater than usual harm and discomfort to my participants of my research. All right, keep information about individual participants confidential. Okay, that's their personal business. Sometimes you can conduct research, and that research may not be on something that that person wants to be publicized. Okay, so you have to keep the information confidential and out of the public eye. Okay, and then fully debrief. What they're talking about here with the debriefing is after your research is over, you need to explain to your participants what the research was about, what you were looking for in the research, what your research results were, any type of deception that you didn't have to disclose initially to your participants. Okay, so be familiar with that as it relates to the ethics. That might be a bonus question. All right, and then the last slide is just giving you some helpful information. I didn't want to delete this from the slides because I thought it was helpful. And I used to teach about SQ3R, the study method, when I taught a college success course. So this is some great information. It's a method, study method. The S and the Q are, and the 3 R's stand for survey, question, read, retrieve, and review. So you can take a look at that, but I thought this was a kind of great slide to still leave in there for you all to be able to review. And that concludes the remainder of Chapter 1.